Joyce Meyer stood confidently in front of the audience, her eyes scanning the room, which was filled with a mix of eager faces and quiet anticipation. She had never imagined she would find herself here, about to engage in a conversation with one of the most influential figures in the world. Elon Musk? This wasn't just any casual exchange. It was a debate that would challenge everything she believed and hold her convictions to the fire. Across from her, Elon Musk sat with an air of calm assurance, his sharp gaze focused intently on her. He had built an empire on reason, data, and logic, and now he was prepared to challenge her in ways that no one else had dared. His mind worked like a machine, calculating every word before it left his lips. The tension in the air was palpable. Joyce knew this wasn't going to be easy. Then, without warning, the first question came, piercing the stillness like a sudden clap of thunder. "Why do you believe in God?" Elon asked, his voice steady but firm. "When there is so much pain in the world, why does God allow suffering if he's all-powerful and all-loving?" The room fell silent, each person hanging on the question, and Joyce could feel the weight of it pressing down on her chest. This wasn't just a philosophical inquiry, it was deeply personal. It was the kind of question that could shake anyone's faith to its core, especially someone like Elon, who had built his life on scientific principles and cold, hard logic. But Joyce didn't flinch. Her faith had been tested time and again, and this was not the moment to shrink back. "Suffering exists because of free will," Joyce began, her voice steady, yet infused with a quiet strength. "God gave us the ability to choose. Freedom is essential. But with that freedom comes the possibility of pain. It's not that God causes suffering. Rather, he allows us to experience it, because through suffering, we grow, we learn, and we become more like him." Elon raised an eyebrow, his skepticism evident. There was no immediate response, but the question hung in the air like a challenge. "But doesn't that seem like an excuse?" Elon countered, leaning forward, his tone not cruel but probing. "If God is truly all-powerful, why not just remove suffering altogether?" The crowd murmured, sensing the growing tension. Joyce could feel the eyes of the room upon her, the pressure mounting. This was the critical moment. How would she answer? "God doesn't remove suffering because he wants us to choose him," Joyce said slowly, her voice clear and unwavering. "He desires our love freely given, not forced or coerced. It's in the midst of suffering that we often learn to lean on him, to trust him in ways we never would when everything is calm and peaceful." There was a pause. Elon looked at her with a penetrating gaze, but something in her words seemed to have made an impact. Still, he wasn't satisfied. "But isn't that unfair?" Elon pressed, his voice tinged with frustration. "Why should people have to suffer just to learn something? What about the innocent ones? The children?" Joyce's heart clenched at the thought of innocent lives caught in the storms of suffering. She knew this was where her faith would be truly tested, but she wasn't about to give in. "It's not about fairness," she replied softly. "It's about purpose. God doesn't cause suffering, but he allows it to shape us, to draw us closer to him. Without suffering, we wouldn't know what true peace is. Without suffering, we wouldn't understand the beauty of love or the depth of grace. Suffering opens our eyes to the blessings we often take for granted." The room was still. Even Elon seemed momentarily taken aback, his usually sharp demeanor softened, as though he had not expected such an answer. Joyce could feel the surge of confidence rising within her. She had made her point, but she knew this was only the beginning. Elon Musk wasn't the type of man to back down easily, and she had to be prepared for more. As if reading her mind, Elon leaned forward once again, his eyes narrowing with curiosity. "You talk about love and faith," he said, "but what about the world's problems? What about the hunger, the wars, the endless suffering that goes on every day? Where is God in all of that?" Joyce felt the weight of his question pressing against her heart. She had seen so much suffering in her own life, in her own journey, but she had also witnessed the power of love and compassion to heal even the deepest wounds. "God is in the hearts of those who serve others," Joyce replied, her voice full of conviction. "He is in the hands of those who feed the hungry, in the voices of those who speak out against injustice. God doesn't abandon us in our suffering. He works through us to bring healing, to bring change. Every act of kindness, every effort to help the broken, is evidence of God's presence in the world. Elon sat back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. The wheels in his mind were turning, no longer just challenging but processing. Joyce knew he wasn't ready to accept everything she said. He never would be. But there was a shift, something deeper happening in his heart. Could it be that, despite his doubts, he was beginning to see the world through a different lens? Joyce wasn't sure, but she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this debate was having an impact. The questions continued to come, each one more challenging than the last. But Joyce was beginning to feel a sense of peace amidst the storm. She had spoken the truth, and now it was time to trust that those words were doing their work. Elon wasn't going to give up easily, but Joyce knew she wasn't here to win the debate. She was here to plant a seed, to share her truth, and to let God's love shine through, no matter the outcome. The room remained tense, but Joyce's heart was calm, knowing she had done what she came to do. The debate continued, and with each passing moment, the questions from Elon Musk grew more pointed, more intense. The room was filled with the kind of electricity that only comes when two strong minds collide, each determined to stand their ground. Joyce could feel the tension building, but she remained steady. She had faced far greater challenges in her life than this debate. This was just another opportunity to share the love and truth of God. Elon wasn't one to back down. He leaned forward again, eyes locked on hers, his tone sharper now. "You say faith is a choice," he said, "but what about the people who don't have the luxury of that choice? What about the millions who live in despair, who never get the chance to hear about God's love? How do you explain their suffering?" Joyce paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle. She had spent her life witnessing the depth of human suffering, but she had also witnessed God's incredible ability to transform pain into purpose. She knew the answer wasn't simple, but the truth she had come to understand over the years was clear. "It's true," Joyce replied slowly, her voice soft yet firm. "Not everyone has the same opportunities to encounter God's love in the same way, and that is a tragic reality. But God's love isn't confined to just one place or one people. He works in mysterious ways, through the lives of those who do know Him, through acts of kindness, and through moments of grace that may seem small but are powerful. It's not about us being the ones to save the world. It's about God using us to bring His love to those who need it most. And even in the darkest of circumstances, I believe He's there, moving hearts, drawing people closer to Him." Elon seemed to consider this, but his skepticism remained. "So, what you're saying is that suffering is somehow a part of God's plan?" His voice was questioning, but there was a flicker of something else in his eyes, perhaps doubt, perhaps curiosity. Joyce met his gaze, her heart steady. "Yes," she said, her words calm but powerful. "Suffering is a part of the human experience, and while it's not something God causes, it's something He allows. It's through suffering that we find strength, resilience, and a deeper connection to Him. God's plan isn't always about immediate relief. Sometimes, His plan is to walk with us through our pain, to help us discover our own capacity for healing and love. He doesn't leave us alone in our suffering." Elon leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping on the armrest, as though weighing her words. He wasn't convinced, not yet, but there was a shift. He was listening more intently, reflecting on her response. "But what about the people who never find peace?" he pressed, his voice low and steady. "What about the people who suffer their entire lives without ever seeing a glimmer of hope? What about them?" Joyce felt the room hold its breath, the weight of Elon's question pressing down on her. She had seen people face unimaginable hardship, people who never seemed to catch a break, people who cried out in their pain. The question was gut-wrenching, and yet, she had to answer it truthfully. "Peace doesn't always come in this life," Joyce said gently, her eyes softening. "But God's peace is different from the kind of peace the world offers. It's not the absence of trouble. It's the assurance that, even in the midst of the storm, we are not alone. Some people will never experience peace in this life as we understand it, but I believe God's promise is that He will be with them, that He sees their pain, and that He is preparing a place for them where there is no more suffering." There was a pause, and the weight of her words seemed to linger in the air, echoing in the hearts of the audience. Elon sat back, his expression unreadable. For a moment, he said nothing, as though trying to process the depth of what she had shared. "But that still doesn't answer my biggest question," Elon said after a long silence, his voice quieter now, almost hesitant. "If God is all-loving, why do bad things happen to good people? Why do innocent people suffer? Why does it seem like the world is broken, beyond repair?" Joyce felt a pang in her heart, the familiar ache of this question that had haunted humanity for centuries. She had faced it herself many times, asking it in the darkest moments of her life. But the answer, though difficult, was one she had come to understand deeply. "God didn't create the world to be this way," Joyce said softly, her voice filled with compassion. "The world is broken because of sin, because of the choices we make. We live in a fallen world, and that brokenness affects everyone, not just the bad people. But God, in His love and mercy, has a plan to redeem it all. It's not an easy journey, and it doesn't come without pain. But I believe that, through the love of Jesus Christ, God is making all things new." There was another long pause as Elon sat silently, the gears in his mind turning, struggling to reconcile the logic of the world he knew with the faith that Joyce had so passionately spoken about. "And what about people who don't believe in God at all?" Elon asked, his voice quiet now, as if the question had been lingering in the back of his mind all along. "What happens to them?" Joyce took a deep breath, her heart heavy but filled with hope. She knew this was a question that often caused division, but she wasn't afraid to speak the truth. "God's love is for everyone," she replied, her voice full of conviction. "He doesn't force anyone to believe in Him, but He invites us all to come to Him. It's not about our belief alone. It's about God's grace, His desire for us to know Him, to experience His love and forgiveness. But ultimately, belief in Him is the way we experience the fullness of that love. It's the way we find true peace, true purpose." Elon didn't respond immediately, but Joyce could see something in his eyes. The hardened exterior he had carried into the debate seemed to be softening, just a little. He was still processing, still grappling with the questions, but there was a flicker of something new there, perhaps the beginning of understanding. "I still don't know if I can fully grasp what you're saying," Elon admitted, his voice quieter now, more reflective. "But I can't deny that there's something different about the way you're speaking. Something real." Joyce smiled, her heart filled with compassion. "I'm not asking you to fully grasp it all," she said gently. "Faith isn't about having all the answers. It's about trusting that God is good, even when we don't understand everything. It's about taking that first step, even when we can't see the whole journey." As the debate continued, Joyce felt a deep sense of peace settle in her heart. She wasn't there to win Elon over with logic or reason. She was there to share a truth that went beyond human understanding, something that could only be known through faith. And she knew that, even if Elon didn't leave with all the answers, the seed of truth had been planted. As the debate carried on, Joyce could feel the weight of each question pressing down on her. Elon Musk, relentless as always, continued to challenge her beliefs with sharp, probing questions. But now, something had changed. There was a subtle shift in the air. Elon's usual confidence was beginning to waver. The questions were still coming fast, but Joyce could sense that he was no longer questioning her just for the sake of argument. There was a flicker of genuine curiosity in his eyes, an openness that had been absent at the start. Elon leaned forward once again, his gaze focused on her as if searching for some crack in her conviction. "You talk a lot about love and forgiveness," he said, his voice tinged with skepticism. "But what about the world's real problems? The hunger, the wars, the injustice. Where is God in all of that?" Joyce felt the weight of his words, a familiar ache in her chest. She had seen firsthand the devastation that had ravaged so many lives, the unthinkable pain that had left people questioning everything. But in the depths of that pain, she had also seen the hand of God working, quietly, humbly, through the hearts of those who cared for the suffering. "God is in the hearts of those who serve others," Joyce replied, her voice steady, filled with compassion. "He is in the hands of those who reach out to the hungry, the voices of those who stand against injustice, and the lives of those who choose to love in the face of hate. God doesn't stand by idly as people suffer. He works through us, using our hands, our voices, and our hearts to bring healing, to bring change. Elon sat back, his expression thoughtful. He wasn't convinced, but Joyce could see the wheels turning in his mind. He was grappling with something deeper now, and that was progress. But why does it have to be this way? Elon pressed. Why does God allow people to suffer? Why doesn't he just step in and fix everything? If he's all-powerful, why doesn't he end it all? The question hung in the air like a weight, the same question that had haunted many throughout history. Joyce took a deep breath, her heart steady but heavy. She had faced this question herself, more times than she cared to count, but she knew the answer wasn't easy. It wasn't simple, but it was truth. God doesn't cause suffering, Joyce said, her voice calm but resolute. But he allows it, because he respects the gift of free will he gave us. We have the power to choose how we live, how we treat one another, and how we respond to pain. And with that freedom comes the possibility of suffering. But he doesn't leave us in it alone. He's right there with us, walking through the pain with us, showing us how to love, how to forgive, how to heal. For the first time in the debate, Elon seemed to falter. His usual sharpness dulled, as if her words had struck a chord somewhere deep within him. He wasn't giving up, no, not by a long shot. But there was a shift, a slight softening in his stance. And what about those who can't find peace? Elon asked, his voice quieter now, more reflective. The people who suffer all their lives without any resolution, without any hope. What do you say to them? Joyce's heart tightened. She knew this question all too well. She had seen the faces of people who had given up hope, people who couldn't imagine a way out of their pain. But she also knew that in the darkest moments, God was there. His love was greater than any darkness, any suffering. I've met people who have suffered deeply, Joyce began, her voice soft but full of conviction. People who have lived with pain for years, and sometimes it feels like there's no end. But even in those moments, I believe that God's peace is real. It's not always the kind of peace we can see or touch, but it's the peace that comes from knowing we are never truly alone. Even when everything around us is falling apart, God is there, holding us, comforting us. And sometimes that's all we need to keep going. Elon's expression was unreadable, but Joyce could sense that her words were having an effect. The skepticism wasn't gone, but it had begun to melt away, piece by piece. You keep talking about faith, Elon said, a hint of frustration creeping into his voice. But how can you ask people to believe in something they can't see, touch, or measure? It's illogical. If faith is the answer, why doesn't God just show himself and end all the confusion? Joyce paused for a moment, allowing the question to hang in the air. It was a valid question, one that many had asked before him. And while she didn't have a scientific answer, she knew the truth of what faith meant in her own life. God doesn't ask us to believe without reason, Joyce said, her voice gentle but firm. He asks us to believe without seeing because faith is what connects us to him. It's the confidence that, even though we can't always see his hand, we can trust that he is working. We don't need to see God to know he's real. Just like we don't need to see the wind to feel it, we don't need to see God to know that his love is all around us. Elon leaned back, deep in thought. The room fell silent as the audience hung on every word. It wasn't the kind of silence that felt tense. It was the kind of silence that came with contemplation. Elon was no longer just debating for the sake of winning. He was listening, truly listening. But what about people who do terrible things and seem to get away with it? Elon asked, his voice quieter now, almost pained. Where is justice? Where is God's justice when evil goes unpunished? Joyce felt a sharp pang in her chest. This was the hardest question, the one that made people doubt not just God's goodness but his fairness. But she had faced it before, and she knew the answer wasn't simple. It wasn't easy, but it was true. God's justice is real, Joyce said with unwavering certainty. But it doesn't always happen on our timeline. We live in a broken world where evil often goes unpunished in the moment, but God sees everything. He knows every heart, every action, every intention. And one day, he will make everything right. In the meantime, he offers grace and forgiveness to those who turn to him, because he doesn't want anyone to perish. Elon didn't speak for a long while. He seemed lost in thought, the weight of her words pressing down on him, and Joyce could see it. The flicker of understanding in his eyes, the quiet stirrings of something new. For the first time, he wasn't just trying to win the debate. He was searching for something deeper, something he couldn't measure or explain. And what about forgiveness? Elon asked, his voice softer now, almost tentative. Even the worst people, like those who have caused the greatest harm, can they be forgiven? Joyce nodded slowly, her heart heavy but filled with hope. Yes, she said quietly, even the worst. Because God's grace is bigger than our mistakes. His forgiveness is available to anyone, no matter what they've done. But they have to come to Him, to truly repent and turn away from their sin. God wants everyone to find redemption, to experience His love and grace. Elon was quiet for a moment, processing her words. And Joyce could see it now, a shift, a change. He wasn't fully there yet, but something had begun to change inside him. I still don't know if I believe in all of this, Elon admitted, his voice quieter now, more vulnerable than before. But I can't deny that something about your words resonates with me. Something about what you've said feels real. Joyce smiled gently, her heart full. You don't have to have all the answers, she said softly. Faith isn't about having it all figured out. It's about taking that first step, trusting that God will guide you. He's patient, and He's always ready to meet you where you are. And in that moment, Joyce realized that the debate had shifted from an argument about ideas to a conversation about something much deeper, something far more profound. It wasn't about winning or losing. It was about planting seeds of truth and love, and trusting that, in time, those seeds would grow.